The digital work is by Refik Anadol, who is an LA-based Turkish artist, and it's arguably the first artwork in the world to use quantum computing as its source, and it is also a reverie on our humans' relationship to nature, and both its reification and at once its destruction in our hands. We've kind of designed that because he was very happy with that Federation Court space, but one aspect of that space is that it does have an enormous amount of sunlight, direct sunlight on the screen during summer, at our harshest summer days. So we've suspended a black scrim over the space to kind of cut down some of that harsh light, and it has this effect of somehow almost kind of trapping you underneath it, and this quite strange experience of having that sort of hovering above you while this flowing, mesmeric nature displays on the screen in front of you. The one work that we commissioned for the exhibition, which is one of my favourites in the show, I must say, is a piece by the Polish-born German-based sculptor Alicia Kłada, and it's a piece called Weltenlinie. And it's an extraordinary illusionistic array of mirrors and steel and sort of naturally occurring objects like tree trunks, but then have been recast into various materials. And it presents as an incredibly kind of simple and elemental display, but in fact there's an enormous amount of precision in the way that she's laid these out to create a series of illusions where, as you walk through the space, each object appears to transform into a mirror image of itself exactly, but with a different material. So it's almost like you can't believe your eyes. It's calling into question sort of the received knowledge of what's in front of us, if you like. So it's a really sophisticated but incredibly fun installation. Stuart Haygarth is one of the designers in the exhibition. He's based in London, and he's worked with the NHS, the National Health Service in London, to reclaim a whole lot of optical lenses, so from both reading glasses and sunglasses, or tinted prescription glasses. And after a time, you know, they wear out, you scratch them, whatever it is, but you can't reuse them. So he's recycled them into this suspended globe, which is like this glowing orb with a light in the centre of it, and it does have this optical trick where it looks like some kind of crystal chandelier, and instead turns out to be made up of everyday objects, which is a really fantastic illusion, I think, at the heart of it as well. Tabor Robak is an American artist who uses a kind of video game language to his aesthetic, and he's created a space that uses 100 wall-based screens, and they're configured in these configurations to create little or entities, what he calls magi. And each of these entities or organisms is a cross between technology and biology, and I like to think about them as the kind of forms that will replace the human race. So the kind of forms that we've helped create but that will exist beyond us. And the work is called Megafauna, and each one of these magi relate to a different industry which is going to be transformed, we suspect, through machine learning and artificial intelligence. Yes. Dambit comes from a culture where you would normally, traditionally have to find the materials yourself and mine them out of the ground, pull them out of the ground, ochres and dirt, find the logs and the barks yourselves to make works in the tradition of her culture. But having suffered a terrible car accident, she was wheelchair bound, which meant that she had to get special permission to use paint from a tube. And after being granted this permission, all of a sudden all these colours that aren't available in ochres and the ground open up, and so she's adopted this iridescent blue as a sort of signature of her style. And a little story there which most people don't know is that she, as part of commissioning this room, we have a whole lot of these standing hollow logs, and she asked one of our curators, how many poles are there in Jackson Pollock's Blue Poles, which is in the NGA collection in Canberra, and he said 8, so we have 9. So we have the biggest set of blue poles in the Australian collection. youngest people who is in the Triennial is a young African-American woman called Stingily. And her installation is over 700 trophies, the kind you would be receiving if you won an amateur athletics event, let's say. And it's a comment on the competitive nature both of her family, but also of the American and global environment, that people are really judged about their successes through the eyes of others, I guess. And so each of those inscriptions that would normally be "you came first" or "second" have been replaced by little aphorisms that she's written. So you sometimes might say something like, "You did the best with what you had," or "They didn't have this sport at my school." And so it becomes this combination of both prowess but also whimsy. Botanical Pavilion is by a local artist, Geoff Nees, working with Kengo Kuma, who is one of the key leading living Japanese architects. And its form is a series of interconnected sections that use traditional Japanese architecture approaches, which were developed actually in relationship to that country being so earthquake impacted. So a lot of the techniques that they've developed bring things into tension without using glues and screws and nails, which would otherwise split the structure when there was an earthquake. So this is a really wonderful pavilion. One of the funnest things in the exhibition is Porky Hefer's Plastocene installation, which involves a number of sea creatures that are kind of speculative sea creatures of what would happen when they evolve these different species like octopi or fish after coming into contact with ocean plastics. So either single-use straws or Q-tips, cigarette butts also. So originally intended to be a kind of playground for children. COVID meant they were no longer interactive in this iteration, but I guess the fun and the light-hearted look at that serious issue is still very much present in that installation. We have a fantastic video work by Natasha Matilda Smith, who's a New Zealand-based artist, and it's a piece called "If I Die, Please to Delete My SoundCloud." And Natasha's ennui of modern life, being alone, being isolated, and attempting to navigate the murky waters of online dating and companionship, I guess, are played out in this terribly funny but terribly sad and lonely kind of requiem of what we should do with her digital footprint if she passes away. Its inspiration was Peter Greenaway's Last Supper project, and so it does have a really strong link to cinema or filmmakers, as well as this sense of, which Greenaway did really well, of sort of activating artwork in very ephemeral and simple ways to ask us questions about how we create our own narratives in front of artwork and en masse together. And so it's a piece that was developed in-house. It was created by our multimedia team here. The script, as it were, was written by Dr. Ted Gott, who's our Senior Curator of International Art. So he's really one of the key people here with that deep knowledge of historical art, but also a love of the importance of the French Salon as a space. And so it was his reverie as much as anything on the Salon and the stories that each of those individual artworks are trying to tell in that space. In Salon and Lumière, there are moments where the whole room is transformed simultaneously into a state where perhaps every one of the frames in the Salon gallery is illuminated, but nothing else is illuminated, or the paintings turn into sort of static television screens. And this is done through our multimedia team being just incredible at what they do, using data mapping to install a whole array of projectors around the room, and then they're able to map where every single painting is and its size, and create an ensemble, or which wraps around the whole space. So it has been a really fantastic way for people who are visiting the gallery to see some of the expertise that we have in-house, which has also been really exciting to sort of celebrate some of that technical side of the gallery's stuff. Jim Shaw is an artist who really made his name in the West Coast scene in the 1980s and 90s. He is really drawn to the, I guess, almost detritus of the image culture of the US, and drawn to things like folk art and sort of the non-institutionalized art form. So he made a work that's in the Triennial from a repertory theatre backdrop, so the kind of backdrop you would see in a kind of an amateur theatre production. And the backdrop depicts the Capitol building in the US, which has obviously been on a lot of people's television screens recently, seat of power of the US Senate. And hovering above this scene is an array of 1950s white goods, the kind that really powered the American economy but also created the myth of the American dream. And he's embellished this with an enormous nuclear explosion mushroom cloud that seems to be somehow made of marshmallow or bubblegum or something. And so you have this sense of the end of a kind of American dream, the failure of an American dream, literally being atom bombed in front of you at enormous scale. So one work that does play very clearly with perception is Geoff Koons' Venus. This is a piece where Geoff Koons has taken a miniature figurine of Venus from the 18th century, made of porcelain, blown it up to be over 2 meters high, made of stainless steel, highly polished. So you get this mirror finish, and you can see both yourself and other people in the room looking at this work, but distorted in her shape. And it's one of the most technically sophisticated works he's made, and certainly one of the most technically sophisticated we've ever shown in the gallery.